Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
But now he felt powerless. He had loved the IT industry since he was a child and spent a lot of time learning. His ability was second to none in the country, but this job was too frustrating for him. If this kept on, his and Edwin's company would collapse. The more he thought about it, the paler his face became. His concentration difficulty was causing mistakes with the code he had entered. Preston stood up and threw his headphones aside in frustration. Damn! He was mad at himself for making such a low-level mistake. But the moment he turned around, someone sat down in his place. Then he heard the crackling of the keyboard. Preston looked back and was wide-eyed to see Nicole sitting in front of his laptop. "Hey! What are you doing?" he yelled. That was the terminal of his system, and typing in any piece of code incorrectly would cause huge problems for the entire system. And Nicole, whom he thought knew nothing, was messing with it. Nicole stared at the screen and hissed, "Shut up if you don't want your system to crash now." Her cocky reply struck Preston dumb. He looked at the computer screen and saw Nicole skillfully enter a string of high-level code that he had never seen before. Watching the code that she compiled take effect and fix the bug that he had failed to patch, Preston was utterly astonished. He never expected that his cousin, who came from the countryside, was actually a hacker master. Moreover, her skill was above his. After pressing the last key, Nicole let out a smile as she had fixed yet another hidden vulnerability that Preston had not found. Done. You can't even. Preston went to the balcony to call Edwin. Nicole could not hear what he was saying, but she could see him looking back at her from time to time with a more and more stunning look on her face. After hanging up the phone, Preston calmed himself down. "I didn't know that you knew things about our company." Nicole nodded calmly. Edwin had looked for her before, but she did not trust him, and so she did not help him at the time. But Zeke had already sent her the details of this job. She had just skimmed through but did not want to get involved. But looking at the state of the system, Edwin would not be able to survive until tomorrow if she did not help him. Looking at Preston's hesitant look, Nicole said with a half-smile, "You don't want to take me there?" "No." Preston shook his head quickly. This job had left him in a mess for so many days, and he had already had enough. "But Edwin said that he texted you about the expert whom you know. I will be grateful if you can introduce us to him." Nicole looked at him nonchalantly. "You want to meet the expert? Let's go." Preston was stunned, wondering what Nicole meant. Nicole was already in the doorway. "What are you still waiting for? Let's go." Preston was a little confused, but he still followed Nicole away. Preston drove his car and came in front of his company, then watched Nicole go in and still could not wrap his brain around what she meant. "Aren't we seeing the hacking master? Why is she going in there? Is she trying to skirt around? But seriously, the skill that she displayed just now was really badass. I wonder how badass the master is behind her." Preston collected his thoughts and quickly parked the car, then followed Nicole into the company. Deep down inside, he still believed in Nicole. Preston did not know why Nicole did this, but he did not question her behavior. Instead, he overtook her and led the way for her. The place looked more like a precision studio than a company. As soon as she entered, Nicole saw the high-tech interior decoration, which had a strong futuristic vibe. Preston was doing the explanation while secretly looking proudly at Nicole. He felt a little disappointed when he saw her nonchalant expression. Nicole knew what he was thinking and felt a little helpless. Preston did not talk much at home, and she did not expect him to have such a temperament. When it came to issues that he knew, he had a lot to talk about. The two walked along, with Preston taking the lead in the elevator. Nicole raised an eyebrow and followed suit. It was a fully transparent sightseeing elevator, which offered a superb view of the outside, and people outside could see things on the inside. On each floor, many people looked at the slowly ascending elevator. They were curious about who the girl following the boss was. Thinking of Edwin, who hurried over today at noon, and the little boy whom Black Shark brought this morning, everyone had a curious look on their faces. But they quickly retracted their gazes and looked at the computer in front of them solemnly. After all, the company had a big problem, and each of them had been working overtime for almost half a month, day and night in shifts, to keep an eye on the defense net in their hands because once a position went wrong, the entire team would fall. This immense pressure overwhelmed many people. They were irascible, talking about how to solve the problem. Nicole looked at these thin young men and said, "They all must have had a long day." Preston nodded. He knew best what kind of life these people had had during this time. Preston looked at Nicole and said helplessly, "Yeah, so we really need you to call someone to help quickly. You said you wanted to come to my company, and now I have already brought you here. Can you call the master over?" Preston did not know what she wanted to confirm about by coming in person. Nicole glanced at him and did not say a word. The elevator stopped at the top floor, where Nicole could see at a glance that it was spacious with classy decoration in shades of gray, a relatively large mainframe in the center, where a group of people surrounded Zeke and Edwin, who had a serious look on their faces. A skinny and pale man looked at Zeke and said impatiently, "You said you would find someone to fix it. Why hasn't the person arrived yet?" Zeke glanced at Black Shark. Nicole had sent him a message when she returned, and now she should be on her way. "Be patient. The rescue will be here right away." Edwin looked at the firewall that was blinking its red warning light and looked at Zeke with doubt. "Spectre, this firewall seems to disintegrate internally. Is this what you've done?" Zeke looked at him calmly and nodded. Black Shark blew up instantly. "Why did you do this?" He dismantled this firewall from within. When it collapses, the time and efforts many of us have spent in the past few days will all come to nothing. "What the hell is he thinking?" thought Black Shark. But Zeke just glanced at him nonchalantly and said calmly, "I want to test your emergency response mechanism." "Test our emergency response mechanism? Why?" Everyone looked at Zeke doubtfully. Zeke sighed, looked at the self-deleting firewall program, and said faintly, "Destroy the emergency firewall mechanism." "What?" "This is the last line of defense against incessant attacks. Instead of helping us defend against the attack, Zeke wants to destroy the firewall." "How could he do this?" Everyone looked at Zeke angrily. A female hacker code named Warbler stepped forward and angrily scolded Black Shark, saying, "Look what kind of people you've invited. He is not here to help but to sabotage us all." She was the most powerful female hacker in the organization and was indispensable for holding up the defensive front. Seeing Zeke wanting to destroy the things that she had spent much effort to build, Warbler was almost going crazy. But she did not get mad at Zeke when she saw his baby face. Instead, she vented all her anger on Black Shark, who brought Zeke over. Black Shark was upset. He did not know that this so-called top hacker on the Hunters was not up to scratch. He would not grant Zeke any privilege simply because he was also a male. So he frowned and grilled Zeke. "What do you want, Zeke?" Zeke did not look at him but stared at the Jugu, which was slightly inferior to the JW3000. The screen clearly showed that the self-destruction procedure was about to be ready. He quickly pressed the start button, and soon, angry roars rose in the company. "Who the hell took down the firewall that I had worked so hard to guard for half a month? Aya, I will kill him. Take me along. I want to see what floor that bastard is on." It crumbled straight away. The floors must be high. "Oh, wait a second. How come it's the top floor's IP? The mainframe has crashed?" Everyone looked at what happened, consternation replacing anger on their faces. Those two bosses are mad. Black Shark and Warbler watched with reddening eyes as the mischievous childlike Zeke caused their server to crash. "Spectre, I will kill you." Zeke ignored the roar and typed rapidly on the keyboard. Before this, he had seen Nicole upload a program that she always used. So it did not matter now, even though the system's firewall had collapsed. Zeke had called up all the code information quickly and watched the thing automatically doing its cracking. Raster. It must be faster than the other guy. The other guy's encroachment was like an endless black hole, as if the infinite reproduction of the cracked code far exceeded the passing speed of ordinary people's brains. Facing such an opponent, fine beads of sweat started to pop up on Zeke's forehead. "Damn it. If Nicole is still not coming, I won't be able to hold on any longer." Black Shark and Warbler watched him desperately crack their defense system and decided to stop a madman like Zeke. But Edwin, who had been silent all this while, suddenly stopped them from doing so. "Hold your horses. He must have his way." The two looked at him in disbelief. "Boss, Why do you believe in him so much? What's going on? Why protect this brat when he's here creating a mess, boss? Edwin said nothing, but just looked on with mixed feelings. Zeke had also become a little anxious now. It was a second before the defense system was completely breached. If Nicole could not make it here on time, he would have to clash head-on with the guy at the other end. Thinking of the strength of his opponent, even Zeke had a hint of fear in his eyes. No way I could beat him. Zeke rarely conceded defeat in his area of expertise, but this wormhole, like reproduction and erosion of endless code, as far as he knew, could only be written by one person. The progress bar showed 99%, and because information transmission had microseconds of the inspection period, Zeke was now barely faster than the other side. He did not notice the atmosphere around him, which had become silent. Black Shark and Warbler looked at the almost blood-red screen and closed their eyes silently. It's over. It's all over. Black Shark was now extremely regretful. His defense system was supposed to hold up for another 3 days or so, but now it was ruined by a brat. He looked at the progress bar, which read 99.9%, and felt like wanting to kill Zeke. Looking at the blood-red screen, Warbler was supposed to feel the saddest because she was the master designer of this firewall. But when she took a careful look at the interface, she somehow felt that something was wrong. This code seemed to be inconsistent with her original design, and it was even 1,000 times more advanced than what she had designed. Her mind went blank for a moment at seeing this code. What's going on here? Most top hackers were conceited, and so were Black Sharks and Warbler. No way she would admit that she was not good enough to understand that code. Zeke did not have time to think about what was going on in their minds. His fingers had started to tremble, but instead of taking a step back, he stood strong in front of the terrifying opponent. Lucifer, only Lucifer could beat that man, and all I have to do is buy her time. Thinking of this, Zeke's eyes started to look determined, as if he recalled when Lucifer grew up with him step by step many years ago, and he no longer let fear destroy him but slowly calmed down. As Lucifer had said, the hardest thing for a person was to surpass oneself, but few could overcome their own fears. Looking at the screen that had turned crimson, Zeke's shaking finally stopped, and Edwin's voice came from behind him. It's okay. We will just give up if you're scared. Edwin could tell long ago that the boy was indeed helping him. Warbler looked at her boss with puzzlement as if she did not understand what he meant. Zeke gritted his teeth upon hearing what Edwin said. I'm not afraid of him, he said determinedly. Edwin looked at him and gently shook his head. Even he could tell that the other guy had not really launched an attack, but even in the process of cracking the code, Zeke had almost lost. He seemed to be scared of the hacker on the other side. Looking at Black Shark's attitude toward Zeke at the beginning, it was not hard for Edwin to imagine that Zeke should be much better than Black Shark, even the top hacker in Hustruberg. But he looked so clumsy and appeared powerless when facing the opponent on the other side. Edwin's brow furrowed tightly as he wondered what kind of opponent Zeke was facing this time. Black Shark and Warbler had lost their hope. They stood and watched coldly as their boss tried to comfort the teenager. Just then, Warbler's keen ear heard the crisp bell of the elevator arriving behind them. Maybe the people downstairs come up to demand an explanation when they see the firewall crumple, she said in her mind. She could not care less, as she was entirely attracted to the seemingly magical code, and she could not take her eyes off it. Several people around were also staring at the computer screen in front of Zeke, and no one cared to look at the elevator. Zeke clenched his fingers nervously, watching as the progress bar was about to hit 100% while thinking that Lucifer might have been tied up with something else and could not make it here on time. Zeke shook his head to shake the thought from his mind. He then stared again at the Jugu and whispered something to himself. If those people around him got closer, they would have heard him repeating a sentence. People live to surpass themselves. The last mile of the progress bar was often ridiculously slow. Zeke was so nervous that he could hear his increasingly agitated heartbeat. He tried to fight back the urge to run away and quietly waited for this battle to arrive. Just then, he heard a flat voice come from behind him. Get out of the way. Such an indifferent voice was raising some eyebrows. They all wondered which fool had come to the top floor and said something so cocky. Zeke was also stunned upon hearing the voice, and then he could not hide the intense surprise in his eyes. He turned his head excitedly and looked at Nicole's cold and beautiful face as if he had seen a savior, with 2 streams of tears flowing down his face. "Nicole, you're finally here." He jumped for joy and immediately gave up the control panel. Nicole gently tugged at the cuffs, casually tied her long hair behind her head, and then stepped forward. Looking at the screen, which had turned fully red, Nicole let out a faint smile. She then casually hit a few keys with her right hand to type out a string of extremely concise code. "Well done," she said without looking up. She just gave Zeke a code with Preston's computer, and he was able to hold on until she arrived, which was not half bad. Zeke heard her compliment and was cock-a-hoop. Watching the opponent's waves of attack diffused by Nicole, his eyes burst with admiration. That was Lucifer. No opponent could last longer than 5 minutes in front of her. Preston, who followed Nicole from behind, had to admit that Nicole was too fast. He had tried his best but still could not catch up. When the people around saw that it was Preston, they all gave way to him and looked at Nicole with doubt and jealousy in their eyes. Since it was the second boss who brought her, they thought she must also be a master. But when Preston saw Nicole standing in front of the control panel, his eyes widened in shock. "Nicole, what are you doing up there? Come down." She was good, but in Preston's view, challenging the boss of the other side was akin to throwing straws against the wind. What he said stunned everyone. They all wondered if she was yet another troublemaker. Black Shark's vision went dark, and he almost puked blood, his face miserably pale. Warbler, on the other hand, looked at Nicole's pretty face with a deep sense of jealousy in her eyes. She stepped forward and tried to drag Nicole down. "Do you know what we're doing here? This is not a place for a little girl like you who knows nothing to mess with the computer. Get down now." Preston was not too happy when he heard this. He smacked Warbler's hand away and said with a smirk, "Who are you to tell my sister what to do?" Nicole was better than anyone here, and no one was qualified to lecture her. Warbler was stunned and then reluctantly let go of her hand. "I didn't expect her to be a nepotist," she mumbled. As Preston ignored her, Warbler glared at Nicole with intractable jealousy in her eyes. Meanwhile, Edwin glanced at Warbler with a weird look in his eyes. Black Shark was jeering at Nicole. "I didn't expect the boss to bring such a brat here. When even Spectre can't solve the problem, what can she do? She probably can't even find a way to download games." The conceited hackers around him agreed with what he said. They gave up the position to Zeke just out of respect for the top hackers, but Zeke did not seem to be what they imagined. Nevertheless, he was the second on the Hustruberg hacker list and 6th on the world list, despite his young age, and he was not so legit. They could still tolerate his troublemaking. But this girl who came out of nowhere seemed to be a relative of the boss, so everyone would not accept her. "Boss, Warbler is right. This is not an internet cafe. What are you thinking by letting such a little girl mess with things?" "Yeah, boss, you can't let her do whatever she wants. I will definitely quit." "Me too." The scene was chaotic at one point. Preston actually wanted to stop Nicole. As much as he knew Nicole was good, this was a highly professional hacking duel. He honestly believed that Nicole could handle it. But when he got closer and saw the screen in front of Nicole, he was confounded. Edwin also turned his head. He was surprised to see the red on the screen fading rapidly. It was unlikely the strategy of the other side. It seemed more like the opponent had encountered a formidable enemy and was forced to flee with his tail between his legs. If the attacker's code was an endless Trojan virus, Nicole's countermeasure was the fastest and most effective antivirus software, directly suppressing the attacker with no room for escape. No matter how deep the black hole was, it could not swallow the sword that could cut it in half. Loading to 100% meant that the firewall had been completely breached, and the door was wide open. The maggot-like code would flock in and cannibalize the system here. Seemingly nothing could stop this from happening. But as soon as the code got in, it found a perpetual motion machine-like cutter on its head, cutting it into pieces so fast that even the self-replicating code could not keep up. The cutter turned around and attacked the computer on the other side, completely bringing the attacker's system down. Nicole's action was extremely fast. She did not care about the surrounding noise but continued to type strings of extremely concise code that inexplicably had a natural suppressing ability on the seemingly powerful program. The more complicated the attacker's program was, the more vulnerable it was to this kind of extremely simple code. The noisy crowd watched what she did. They then looked at the screen in front of her that had been cleaned up. Their doubting voices had stopped, replaced by soft exclamations of awe. This is a god-level kind of skill. The invincible foe in their eyes had been defeated by Nicole within 5 minutes and forced to enter defensive mode. Warbler looked in amazement at what had happened. In Warbler's perception, no female hacker in Hustruaberg could ever surpass her. But now, after seeing what Nicole did, she was sure that Nicole was multiple times better than she was. Who is she, really? Preston was also stunned to see his sister's badass skill. Like Zeke, he was close by and witnessed everything that Nicole had done. He noticed that for each small code of the attacker, Nicole used different variants to deal with it, ensuring that the attacker was not given the opportunity to survive and continue to replicate, suppressing the attacker's powerful replication ability, and perfectly approaching the source of all the codes, which was the host machine of the attacker. What a speed and responsiveness! Could it be that there is no master behind Nicole, and the real master is Nicole herself? Preston looked at his sister with his mouth agape. But soon, he closed his mouth back, and his expression returned to normal. What's there to be surprised about? Preston thought. She is my sister. If she says she could move the earth, I would immediately find her a lever. She is just a hacker, nothing to shout about. Zeke watched calmly as Nicole took care of everything. He looked at the people who were rooted to the spot and felt a sense of superiority. He had already seen Nicole perform her skill multiple times and had long been used to it, so much so that he could now applaud with a straight face. Zeke casually glanced at their expressions, curling his mouth with disdain. Dumbo. Edwin looked at Nicole. He had never intended to stop her when she arrived. He and Nicole had known each other for a long time. When he first saw her, his gut feeling told him that this person had got something in her. That was why he was so reckless, asking for her help for the first time. He just did not expect that there was not another master behind her. Instead, she was the master. Edwin raised an eyebrow with interest, with a deep appreciation in his eyes. But the next second he looked at the screen in front of Nicole, his mouth twitching, and he was speechless. He could not believe that this girl had hacked into the enemy's computer, manipulating the enemy's system, deleting everything including the desktop icons on it. She did not even leave the minesweeper for the other guy. The group of hackers watched Nicole's every move and was all quiet for a second. Black Shark wiped the sweat from his forehead and said with embarrassment, She is the boss? Zeke scratched his chin and smiled darkly as he looked at the few letters that Nicole subconsciously typed with her left hand. On the other side, White looked angrily at the white screen on his computer, which had only a few small black Asperian letters blinking frantically in the lower right corner. Just Singacing. It looked like ridicule, and the tiny letters were spinning and jumping in their place. White cursed in Macronia's most vulgar slang and then smashed the screen to the floor. It's Lucifer again. This bastard has ruined it all. Someone outside the house entered in a hurry as if hearing the noise here. The person looked at White's angry face and frowned. What happened? White paced back and forth in the room irritably, rapidly muttering a long string of Asperians. The person who stormed in quickly summed it up in 2 words, Missio. It had been 20 seconds since he came in. The signature on the screen that was exclusive to Lucifer had gone, so he did not know what had happened. But since the mission has failed, White will have to face Mr. Holder's wrath. Thinking of this, the person bowed respectfully and said, Mr. Holder wants to see you. Meanwhile, on the Preston side, everything was over in just 3.5 minutes. Nicole slowly pulled back her hand and stepped down from the control panel, only to find everyone looking at her as if they saw a ghost. She looked at them in puzzlement. She had disguised her signature, and they could only see White on the screen. No way they could see the black text at the bottom. So why did this group of people look at her with strange eyes? Zeke came silently behind Nicole and whispered, I accepted the job with my codename, Spectre, thinking that it was just another firewall job. I didn't know the opponent would turn out to be White. He was Spectre and yet treated Nicole in this way, so the other people need not be rocket scientists to figure out who Nicole was. After Zeke and Nicole had exchanged intel, Black Shark cautiously stepped forward and asked Nicole, Do you know Lucifer? They could not find a second person who could perform such a drastic and sophisticated skill in Hustuaberg. No, I don't know, Nicole said with a straight face. She ignored the hesitant eyes of those people and casually beckoned Zeke to leave. Just then, a surly voice came from behind her. She couldn't have been Lucifer. I'm now wondering if this boy is Spectre. Warbler walked over slowly. Ignoring Black Shark's disapproving look, she said contemptuously, "They must have been sent by the other side. Otherwise, why destroy our firewall, and why do they know so well the attack methods of the other side? As far as I know, the attacker is skillful and brutal. It is impossible to defeat him so easily. I guess they must be the spies sent by the attacker, who is desperate to steal our information. So they were sent to distract us." Nicole had only taken 3.5 minutes to defeat the attack, which had been stumping her for over half a month. So Warbler was jealous of Nicole. Many of those who had heard what Warbler said started to look at Nicole suspiciously. Yeah, everything seemed to have gone so smoothly, so much so that it feels unreal. With so many people agreeing with what she said, Warbler looked at Nicole provocatively. "I'm the best female hacker in Hustuaberg. No way this woman is better than me." Nicole stood there nonchalantly, looking at her with no emotion in her eyes. Zeke frowned too, and he looked at Warbler with doubt, seriously suspicious that she had not even figured out what Nicole was doing in the last minute and a half. The entire operating system of White's computer had been deleted by Nicole, and she had even erected a new firewall. So it would take at least half a year before White could try to break through the firewall again. And the deal would have long been over within half a year. The conspiracy that she was a spy sent by the enemy was pure rubbish. "You're a staff member here?" he asked casually. Warbler exploded in an instant. She angrily pointed at Zeke and said coldly, "What do you think?" "Of course I am. I'll tell you what, I'm the chief engineer of the company's security program. You have destroyed my security project, and I'm going to make you pay." Before her voice trailed off, Edwin suddenly spoke with a faint voice from behind her. "That's enough." The real security program had long since crumbled, and the emergency system was bound to be defeated today. The attacker was cunning enough to design an illusion that its own firewall still existed. The attacker enjoyed the feeling of playing with the opponent as if he were an omnipotent god, setting up a huge fraud scheme for everyone to walk into it. But in reality, the real emergency security program had been breached. The attacker had created an illusion that everything would only collapse after 3 days to distract them from the attack targets. If they continued to fall for the attacker's firewall, they would discover the database had been emptied only when they were preparing to fight back. That would be 3 days later, the time the attacker would take down the firewall. In 3 days, the attacker could have stolen everything Edwin and his bunch had devoted so much effort to safeguard. When they finally lost all the valuable data to the attacker, those who were mentally weak would definitely suffer a mental breakdown the moment they discovered the truth. The firewall they had worked so hard to protect for days on end was actually a trap, identical to the original firewall, and they themselves might have even executed part of that firewall program. In other words, Nicole had done them justice by wiping all data on the attacker's hard drive. Edwin could imagine how wretched the attacker must have felt for having to watch his data being wiped away. The emotional damage could be even worse than what Eric and his bunch would experience if they were to fall for the trap. The reason Edwin and the bunch had not noticed the trap was simply that the attacker's strategy was beyond their level. After Edwin explained the situation briefly, he looked at Warbler, who showed mixed emotions on her face and let out a sigh. There was a long pause of silence after everyone had learned the truth. Never had they expected that Zeke was not the one who had taken down their firewall. In fact, the attacker had long breached it and even built a fake clone. While the employees stopped talking, Edwin walked to Nicole and Zeke and bowed to them. "Thank you," he said sincerely. Nicole's tranquil gaze was calmer than ever as she looked at Edwin. She gave him a nod and prepared to leave without saying a word. Zeke followed Nicole, planning to tag along. In fact, the two were not bothered whether Edwin and the bunch were feeling in debt. After all, they were paid to do the job. When Preston had finally recovered to his senses, he grabbed his car keys and clapped his hands. "Everybody, the crisis has been resolved. I'm giving you 3 paid days off. Go home and rest well." Only then was the rest of them roused from the daze. They were all feeling ashamed for doubting Nicole after listening to Edwin's explanation. "We're so sorry. We doubted you after listening to Warbler. We weren't in our right mind." Before he could finish his words, another person behind him poked him and said with a gloating mockery, "If I'm not mistaken, weren't you the first who said you would resign?" The man blushed to tears. He waved his hand, trying to explain. But he was an introverted hacker who seldom socialized. In the end, he could not squeeze a word after a long while. When he was frustrated to the roof, Nicole's tranquil voice came. "It's okay." It was a reply to his apology. That man was startled. His eyes looking at Nicole were full of gratitude. The reply also stunned the rest of them for a moment, as they did not expect Nicole to be easy to talk with. "We assumed that she must be hard to get along with because of her indifferent countenance. But now it seems that not only is she pretty, she is way more affable than any of us could imagine." At the thought of this, everyone looked at Nicole with an earnest gaze. Well, everyone except for Warbler thought that. She was glaring at Nicole's back. Edwin's explanation was like a slap in Warbler's face. As the chief firewall engineer, not only had she failed to notice the system she oversaw had been replaced with a clone, but she had also tried to fix and restructure that fake firewall system with all her might. She felt herself utterly stupid. Everyone, including the attacker, must be thinking I'm the most foolish and useless of all, thought Warbler while gritting her teeth in resentment. She had never suffered such a defeat and made such a grave mistake in her profession. Although Edwin did not blame her, she could faintly notice a faint disappointment in his eyes. Warbler dug her nails into her palm without noticing. "If this girl hadn't seen through the attacker's tricks, I would have remained the most competent female hacker in this company, and Edwin wouldn't have treated me this way. And most importantly, this pretentious girl wouldn't have become the center of attention. Even if we had failed our mission, I would have had the means to whitewash everything. But this girl has put me in a tight spot." She stared resentfully at Nicole with naked venom in her eyes.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.